Okay, we are live.
Mayor.
We're ready to go?
Yeah.
First, I want to welcome everyone to this. This is extremely important. This is our first public kickoff for two economic development plans for two areas in the city of Kenner, two areas that basically need some help, Rivertown and Esplanade Mall. The main purpose here will be to gather public input through meetings and online services. Our plan is to have specific actions and items that will help us with the plan to bring new levels of vibrancy back to these two areas, from North Kenner to South Kenner. What's very, very important is that we are not using city funds on this. We were able to obtain a grant with CDGB, Disaster Recovery Grant, with the help of Candace Watkins, our program director for economic development, along with her committee. It's funded by Louisiana Office of Community Development. So that's extremely important to thank Candace Watkins, along with her economic development department and the committee that volunteers their time to do this. Lots of residents of the city of Kenner, business owners of the city of Kenner that volunteer their time to help Ms. Watkins and her department in the city of Kenner. I also want to thank TSW, Tom Walsh with TSW and his group. From the first time that I met them in the committee meetings, I was extremely impressed. And I expressed that I was extremely impressed with Tom and his group. I've met one or two of his people that work for him while they've been with a local realtor of ours, as she's been taking them around, Linda Nugent-Smith, who's a good friend of mine, a Kenner resident and a Kenner businesswoman, Jefferson Parish businesswoman. So I want to thank all those people that are involved and all those people that are making this happen, because this is what the city of Kenner needs. This is what we need to move forward. Working with everyone in the city of Kenner to make sure that our Esplanade Mall comes back or goes into a different format, and also revitalize Rivertown. So no area of Kenner is ever forgotten with this administration, and we will continue to do that. I want to introduce Candace. I'm going to stay on for a little while, Candace, but I have seen this presentation before. I do have another Zoom to get on in about 30 minutes, so I'm going to stay on as long as I can. I'm going to turn it over to our program director, Candace Watkins, and again, thank her and Tom and Linda for all they do. Candace?
Thank you, Mayor. It's great to be with you all this evening. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking your time this evening to participate in this. We're excited to be kicking off the Economic Development Planning Project that will include a revitalization plan for Rivertown and a redevelopment plan for the Esplanade Mall. Our consultants are with us this evening. I'm going to turn it over in just a second. I just wanted to say that TSW began their work gathering data and visiting Kenner in December. They've met with, upward from 80 stakeholders to get information, to get to know us, and to find their way around and to completely understand how Rivertown and the Esplanade Mall fit into the city, what the potential is, and then to guide us putting together plans with actual economic development strategies and action items to implement to make these things happen. So with that, I will turn it over to Tom Walsh and the TSW team. Thank you everyone for being with us this evening.
Thank you, Candace. I'm Tom Walsh with TSW, and we're very excited to be with you tonight. I want to just say real quickly before we go to the next slide is that when I flew over before we even had the job and drove around with Linda to the different sites, both to Rivertown and Esplanade Mall. And it was really helpful to get to know the area and have somebody like Linda give me the at least the local knowledge of what these two areas meant to Kenner. And so that gave us a real guide to how we submitted our proposal and so forth. The most important thing I can tell you is that community involvement makes projects successful. And you all that are on this meeting tonight, you are the champions of this project, and the way this project will be implemented is through your involvement, as well as the mayor and the council persons and their leadership. We are very fortunate as an office to have a large number of our projects like this implemented. And the only reason they were is because, first of all, we did a good job. We did what we're supposed to do and gave you, or gave the different communities the vision, but it can only be implemented by you. So I encourage you all to stay involved with this project. So let's go to the next slide. And I'm going to introduce the team in just a second, but let's do some meeting logistics real quick. Please remain on mute during the presentation. You're going to get a lot of chance to be involved. If you send questions and or comments to the chat box, we will answer and address all the questions during the Q&A portion. And if we don't get to all of them, we will get to the questions and they will be posted at a later date. If you have any questions during the Q&A, please raise your hand when we're at that area. And then please answer poll questions. Now, if you're not able to do that, if for some reason the technology is not favoring you, then visit our online activities and and you can provide input there, or you can do a paper survey. So we have all methods that you can do this with. So let me quickly introduce the team. As I said, we're TSW. I'm Tom Walsh. I'm going to be the principal in charge. Sarah McCauley is the project manager, and she and I have worked on many projects of this importance, and so she does a great job of keeping everybody appraised. I've done something very unusual with this project. I put another project manager on the team. That's Laura Richter. So both of these young women are associates in our firm and highly regarded. And I brought Laura in because she's an architect, and she's going to be focused on the Esplanade Mall part of it. And then Sarah will be focused on both areas. But I wanted to have an architect involved in this. And then Tiffany Mu Young is an urban designer that just joined our firm recently, and very excited to have her working on the project. We also brought in sub-consultants, and our consultants are very important. I've worked with Noel Consultant, which are our marketing analysts, for over 20 years now, and have worked with David. So David will be giving a presentation in a little while. We also have with them Michael Haynes and Jordan Rowe. So both of those guys are engaged on your project and already have provided this information that you'll see tonight, as well as Randy Gibbs, who specializes in economic development on the project. And last but not least is Linda Nugent-Smith. Again, we need that local flavor. So when we come over to Kenner, we hope sometime towards the end of March, again, we will encourage and use her during those trips, and also get feedback from her as we go forward. Next line. So the agenda tonight is the project purpose. I'm going to talk about that in a second. The planning process and the next steps, the study area and analysis, the market overview, what we've heard in preliminary ideas. We really had some great interviews last couple of weeks, and then online engagement tutorial, and then question and answers. So the purpose of the project, to start off with, is to establish a vision for Rivertown and Esplanade Mall based on analysis, public input, city preferences, and feedback from the Main Street Board and Economic Development Advisory Board. Create a community-vetted revitalization plan, and that's where you all come in. We really need to get your input on all for both Rivertown and Esplanade Mall. Same for the Esplanade Mall, and then economic development strategies for each study area. So we really want to. There's lots of great ways to turn this around, and tonight is the night where we start to formulate those ideas. We don't have any idea of exactly how to solve it tonight. This is the starting process for that. So Sarah, you want to take it from here?
Thanks, Tom. Good evening, everyone. We're really excited to be here working on this. I'm Sarah McCauley, again, the project manager. I'll go through some of the planning process that we'll be doing for the next few months. This planning process will take anywhere between 8 and 9 months. We are, as Tom said, at the very beginning in the research and analysis phase, which includes a lot of the market analysis that David and Noel Consulting and Randy have been working on. And then it also includes site analysis and then talking with stakeholders and interviews that Tom alluded to. And then that's also tonight with the kickoff meeting and releasing the surveys and the online activities. this public engagement process will span the entirety of the process. So we really want to hear from you at different touch points, get your input, change our ideas and designs based off of what you tell us. The next phase will be the visioning and concept plans, where we'll have some more ideas that we can get feedback on. We hope to come to you in March for what we call a design charrette, where it'll be multiple days of working through design work pretty quickly with different points in the day where members of the public are welcome to come talk to us, and we would change things on the spot. And then we'll revise after we present those to the larger public online, have some input, and then create some revised concept plans and come back to you in June to get final feedback on that and our implementation plan. And then after that, we will then make revisions again as needed and create our final implementation plan, our final report, and our phasing recommendations in the late summer. So as I've mentioned, we have a series of feedback loops. So there's 3 different ways we're getting input on this process. The first way is public meetings, which is tonight with the virtual kickoff. And then we have that design charrette in March, and then our final open house. So those are at major milestones within the planning process. But throughout the entire process of this project, we are going to have online activities available. So if you're unable to make it to a public meeting, we will have our meetings posted so you can still get the information. And then there will also be activities associated with that online. So we have opened officially today the surveys for each of the study areas. Each survey should take 10 to 15 minutes. We have an interactive map where you can provide initial ideas and comments and have conversations with each other. And then towards the end, we'll have some project prioritization and participatory budgeting activities. And then in addition to those 2 items, we will be having continual guidance from the meetings with Economic Development Advisory Board and the Main Street Board, and then also from city staff and city council members. So our project website is where all of the online activities are, and I'll go through at the very end of this meeting with just giving an overview of that, but this will contain everything for the project. You'll be able to access it from the City of Kenner website. I believe we're going to put a header on there that has a link directly to this, but there will be surveys, our map, and presentation slides, and our videos from previous meetings all together on this website. The final results of this plan will be 2 report documents that include a summary of all of our analysis and the site conditions, the summary of our entire public engagement process, proposed concept designs for both Rivertown and the Esplanade Mall, and then a recommended project list with priority projects tied to those concept plans, and then a phasing plan and economic development strategies to make sure that those plans can be implemented over the next couple decades. So coming up again, we really want you to take that survey. We'll have the survey open until March 8th. And then we'll go through some of the results of that, and just in time to come back and start working on some design work at the end of the month in March. And then, as I've mentioned, that charrette date, we're tentatively scheduled for March 22nd to 24th, but that will really depend on the COVID-19 situation. But regardless of that, all protocols will be enforced for our in-person sessions to make sure that everyone is safe and still able to provide the input we need. Tom, if you want to take it with the analysis.
Yes. So the one thing I want to say is what Sarah just said. Be sure, and if you're taking the survey and you know people that haven't taken it or don't know about the project, please tell your friends. Word of mouth is the best way to get more information out there and to get more feedback for us. And the more feedback we get, the better the plan is going to be. So we really appreciate that. So we're gonna look at the analyze the areas that what we know about them today. So next slide, we're going to look at the overall area. So we have Esplanade Mall is sort of in the center of Kenner, and then north of it you have the Lake Pontchartrain, and you have the Treasure Chest Casino and so forth up at the northern edge, and you have a lot of residential communities up in that northern edge. And then on the south side of Interstate 10, you have the airport, which is a major asset to the community, although it's owned by New Orleans, you also get the residual benefit of the businesses that that the airport needs. And then you have on the southern end, you have the historic district of Rivertown, which is on the, then you have the river itself. So you're surrounded by water on two sides of Kenner, and then you have actually the bayou on as you head towards Baton Rouge, and then New Orleans, which is about 13 miles to the east of you. Next slide. So the connectivity is that you have Veterans Boulevard and Airlines Drive are your two bus routes in to the city and into New Orleans through Metairie and so forth. So you have that connectivity. There are some bike routes throughout Kenner. They don't necessarily touch on Esplanade Mall now. Ultimately, I think that's something that we certainly want to think about. And then you also have the bike path along the levee, which one of my clients has used in the past. When the farmers market was up and they'd be on bike rides, they'd come down along the levee on that. So you have these great assets, and if we can start to incorporate the biking into the overall community and create some great bike lanes to these different areas, that'd be a phenomenal. Next slide. So let's look at each site and take a quick analysis of each site. Interestingly enough, the Rivertown is a very small, compact area of about four really small city blocks. If you look at it, you have a lot of city-owned parcels. The whole area is a historic district. You have the levee on the Mississippi River and LaSalle Landing. I think one of the greatest assets, and we learned this through the interviews, is that you have the planetarium, you have movie theaters that are so important to this. So that has me very excited. You have a fair amount of land that is somewhat underutilized, and we're going to talk about that later on. So I don't want to stay on that too much. And then building restrictions. The airport is going to have building restrictions on both this site and on Esplanade Mall, which is about 4 miles north of you. I think the important part that we want to think about this is our focus is on this historic center, but we also have this other neighborhood that, as it goes east and west, that is underutilized land, and residential is, for this particular study area, is going to be hugely important. Next slide. And this is one of my favorite slides for Rivertown, in that it shows a lot of missing teeth. I call them missing teeth, where you see all those gray areas and you see the white images of where the existing buildings are. And some of those gray areas need to be filled in with white. So we start to give more of an urban context to it, as opposed to all these open spaces. So you have the museum and planetarium I talked about, the LaSalle Landing, and then on-street bike network here. So we have a network of bikes that comes down Williams Street. So that's fantastic that we can have some of those contacts into that area. Next one. We do have some streets accommodate cyclists. The Mississippi River Trail, again, as I talked about a minute ago. We have a bus routes serve the area from Williams Boulevard, which comes on that north-south access line. And what's really wonderful, you have great bones here. You have great street grid. And again, when I first got to this site, the first thing I noticed with Linda was how much shade was missing. You need lots of shade, you need more buildings. There's missing, but it's all there. It's just waiting to be developed, which is very exciting about this site. Next one. So the zoning part of this is really it's zoned as a Rivertown Historic District. We're still trying to go through that and understand what you can and can't do in that. We also have two residential single family in our single family. Now, the other thing that I noticed about this that's so important is these lots on the single family are enormously deep. So it's possible we could add some accessory units to increase some density and get some more housing, or the properties could be used differently. So we want to talk to people that live in the area and all of you about how we could incorporate more living, because the more people we get living down here, the greater energy you have in this community. And I think the millennials, this is just right for a millennial development coming into this area. Next slide. This is what I think an important map we consider. This is what we call a suitability for development map. And so some of the areas in purple are highly suitable for potential development. So we want to look at those areas very closely. Some of these are owned by the city, some are private developers. We've talked to some of the private developers already about that, what they think should be used on it. If somebody's watching this and your land is on here and we haven't talked to you, we're not going to do anything other than ultimately come up with some ideas for it. It does not mean that anything will change. If you want your land to stay the way it is, it will always be that way. But if there's ways we can develop it into the advantage for you from an economic standpoint, as well as to the neighborhood, we certainly want to take advantage of that. Next slide. So let's take a quick look at Esplanade Mall. So Esplanade Mall is about 91 acres with, if you include the Church of King West, it is about 110 acres. It is surrounded by multi-family, single-family detached housing. We're going to really get into that in a little bit, but that's a very important aspect of this. The mall right now is fairly empty. The out parcels are doing well on the northern edge, the Olive Garden, the Rotisserie and Bar, and some of the other restaurants, Copeland's of New Orleans. But the mall itself is somewhat problematic right now. There is the Target is going to remain, and we're not sure about the Dillard's clearance and stuff. We need to find more about that. But you can see there's a lot of area that's open. And also the Regal Grand Esplanade Theater is going to be staying. Notice that we're about 13 miles to the east is New Orleans. We're about a mile from the airport. So again, that flyover, we can only go so high within this area because of the landing patterns and so forth. And then you have about a mile, about 2 miles till you get to the Lake Pontchartrain on the north. Next slide. So this is the community resources. We have one park, which is Greenland Park, which is to the east, separated by the canal, and then Greenland Terrace Park. And then we have a canal on both the east and southern edges of it, and we're going to get to that in a second in the next slide. And then we have the church. So the canal, as you can see, separates these two areas, and boy, it'd be great to see if we could start to knit the fabric back into this whole area. We have two entries into the site. One is on 32nd Street, and then West Esplanade has two entries. So we're limited on access right now. This has such potential. This is the heart of your community, and so I think there's some great things that could be done here to develop this, which we'll talk about in future slides in a couple minutes. Go ahead. The zoning here is all special ordinance, and again, we're trying to understand exactly what that means. We're not going to worry too much about zoning because I think we can work with the city to come up with great ideas, and then if we have to have a special overlay district or something, we'll develop that or make that as a recommendation in our report. We are mostly surrounded by our single family dwellings, and so we certainly want to be sympathetic to that and make sure that whatever we do blends in with the surrounding neighborhoods. Next slide. Okay, this is a fun slide. So you're in the floodplain, the 100-year floodplain, most everything, but it looks like the whole community is basically in the 100-year, and then you have a 500-year flood, and that means that you just have to be built. Any building structure has to be at a certain elevation, and we'll know that pretty soon of what elevation that finished floor elevation has to be. You have to make all of this work. So that's something we'll certainly be thinking about as we go through this project. Next slide. So you can see we're talking about the susceptibility to change map. This one really, over half the land is susceptible to change, and so it's up to us to ultimately come up with those ideas. And Sarah's going to talk to you about these exercises that you can do in a little while, which really gives you a lot of ability to give us input on what you think should happen to the mall site in the future. So I'm very excited to see what your thoughts are as we go through this planning process. And as Sarah said, we'll be over there hopefully towards the end of March. I got my first COVID shot yesterday, so hopefully I get my next one in about 3 more weeks. So I'm looking forward to coming over there and going to restaurants. So next slide. So we're going to take a market overview look at this now. And Sarah, I don't know, who is that? Is that David?
That's gonna be me. I think I'm off mute. Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, there we go. Good job. All right. Well, Sarah, I guess you're controlling slides. If you can go to the next one. So Tom introduced me earlier, but David Loby with Noel Consulting, and our team is leading the market and economic development strategy, along with a couple colleagues who are on this call. But we have kind of about halfway through our process. I'm not going to bore you with all the numbers and put everybody to sleep, but there's a couple interesting things I wanted to pull out to just kind of get everybody thinking about some of the stuff that we're seeing. And we work across the country, so we see a lot of situations. We see a lot of communities that have some of the similar challenges. And I think we've got some great ideas on how we can help use some of this information to our advantage on the plan. But the main goal is making sure that whatever plan we create is grounded in market realities. And so that it doesn't just become some dream that sits on the shelf, but that it can actually be put into place and can create real change. So real quickly here, I'm going to start getting into some demographics. You know, one of the challenges that you have in the entire New Orleans region is actually a decline in population. Part of this, of course, is relative to Katrina. Part of this is just kind of where your sort of market and economy has been. There's actually been a decline since 2000, and Kenner has seen that as well. It's not specific to your community. You're seeing it throughout the region. Pretty flat even since 2010. So that's something for us to keep in mind. That doesn't necessarily prohibit new growth, but that just means we need to put a greater emphasis on trying to bring in new folks that maybe didn't come or consider the community previously, as well as planning for appropriate aging in place. That's going to be really important. Next slide, please. So digging in a little bit deeper on demographics, a couple key things we like to look at. This is one of them, educational attainment. And the map that you see here, it's actually kind of a heat map. The darker the gray color here, the higher concentration of what in this case is educational attainment, those with a bachelor's degree or greater. And one of the things that we find here is Kenner has a lower percentage of those higher educated folks than the region and of the nation. And so this is a little bit of a challenge in terms of attracting many new retailers, many out-of-market developers. This is kind of a leading indicator that a lot of folks look for future income growth if we have a higher educated workforce coming in. It's also one of the biggest challenges that you're going to face in attracting new employers, new office tenants, because they're looking for educated workforce to be in place. And so this is something we're really going to be focusing on. And in many cases, and I think your community is an example of this, it can often be because you don't necessarily have the right housing product to attract some of these folks. So that's something we're going to take a very specific look at as we continue forward on this study. Next slide, please, Sarah. So another similar map here, again, darker concentration is the higher level. In this case, it's median income. So the good news here is Kenner's median income is higher than the region and the metro, but again, you are still lower than the national average. So that is one of the struggles in why you don't see as many out-of-market retailers and developers coming into your community. That's one of the easy check boxes that if they don't see these higher income levels, they might not necessarily put forth the greater effort to understand some of the nuances of the market. The other thing that I think a lot of folks maybe in the community probably already understand is the higher income level is certainly concentrated to the north, and it is quite a different story to the south in Kenner. Next slide, Sarah. All right, this is going to start to dig in a little bit on some of what we see in your housing market. And this is actually starting to focus on the rental housing product. So you're about 43% of the households in Kenner are in rental situations, which in and of itself is not necessarily a challenge or any red flags, but one of the things that we see that's unique to your community is the majority of this product is actually what we kind of call shadow market, which is essentially like individuals who rent their home or a small duplex or a small quadplex, and it's not necessarily professionally managed, professionally maintained property. And so that might be a little different than what certain renter audiences are looking for. The other challenge is another bulk of your rental product, about 5,000 units, are older, what we call Class B or Class C properties. And even though these are professionally managed properties, they're older, they're a little bit dated, and you actually have not seen any new Class A apartment communities developed in just over 2 decades. Now, you certainly have some new ones that are being planned and coming down, but we think that there is going to be additional demand for even more of this product type. And this is one of those components I was talking about where the lack you've seen of this product is actually starting to influence who lives in your community, who you have, who you don't have, which then creates a ripple effect in terms of economic development and attracting employers because of that missing workforce. So important for us to keep in mind. This slide doesn't touch on the for sale housing market. We're still digging into that a little bit. We just kind of started in on that. But one of the things that's pretty obvious to us already is your for sale housing product is fairly homogeneous. And what I mean by that is if you're looking for a 2,500, 3,000 square foot, 30 to 40-year-old home, Kenner's got it. You don't have a lot of other product. You don't have too much new product. You don't have too much one level living, maintenance free product, townhomes, condominiums. You don't have a lot of some of these different product types. And so that is also impacting perhaps some audiences that you might be able to attract that you're not seeing today because you don't have that. Next slide, Sarah. Okay, the retail market, this is pretty high level, but one of the things that was very apparent to us as we first started digging in here is you all have a lot of retail. You are not unique in this situation. We see this is pretty common throughout the country right now. And even before COVID, this was a land use that was seeing challenges because of consumer preference shifting and online purchasing through Amazon and channels like that. So traditional, what we call brick and mortar retail has been struggling because of this. In Kenner, you all have almost 76 square feet of retail for every person in Kenner. And that is over 2 times the national average. So very much an over-retailed situation, oversupplied situation of retail. This doesn't mean we can't get new retail or different retail, but it means that we have to be super selective about the type of retail that's going to work, that's going to be successful in this environment, and the locations and the format in which we're incorporating that. So as we think about redevelopment on the mall site or in Rivertown, it's going to probably look a little different than what some of the other retail historically within the community has looked like. Redevelopment on the mall is probably not going to look like what the mall is today. Something to keep in mind. Next slide, Sarah. Okay, with this, I think I'm starting to transfer a little bit into more the employment story and a little bit more specific on the jobs and economic development. So I'm going to hand this to my colleague, Randy Gibbs, who's going to go over these slides with you all. Randy, are you off mute?
I am off mute. Thank you for a wonderful introduction. Good evening, everyone. Randy Gibbs, the Economic Development Specialist on this team. And so essentially, as David mentioned, I'm looking at jobs, I'm looking at industries and workforce development in particular for these two sites. And so as David mentioned, the retail industry in general has a very strong presence in Kenner's economy. And so it's no surprise that, as this slide shows, that the retail economy, or excuse me, the retail industry employs the most people in Kenner with about 18.7%. And this is back in 2018. The accommodation and food services industry is second. And so what's interesting about these two is that certainly these aren't necessarily the strongest economies, the strongest industries, particularly now in this COVID environment. And so it's a little bit, these industries are threatened a little bit with today's circumstances. And so it's interesting to see where Kenner might be able to transition, shift workers in these industries. The third of the top three industries is healthcare and social assistance. And so very strong. This industry in particular has a very strong presence because of Oxnard Hospital. Oxnard Hospital is the largest private employer in the city of Kenner with 900 employees in 2020. This employment stat doesn't take into account the city of Kenner government, obviously because that's a very public entity, nor does it take into account the Louis Armstrong New Orleans International Airport, as the airport is owned by the city of New Orleans, but that employs about 7,000 people, and that was as of 2013. And so that's a high level look at the private industries and the major employers within the city of Kenner. Next slide, please. And so this slide is to indicate where the jobs are and where the workers are as it pertains to the city of Kenner for jobs that give $40,000 or more in terms of wages and earnings, or for people who earn $40,000 or more a year. And so the heat map shows exactly where these individuals are working. The one at the top shows where the jobs are. And so we see a high concentration here at Oxnard Hospital, also at the airport, and then at the intersection of Veterans Memorial and Williams Boulevard, as well as up in Lake Town. So these are the areas where individuals are earning $40,000 or more in terms of employment. And then you can see on the bottom heat map is where these individuals are living. So it indicates where the workers in Kenner live who earn $40,000 or more. And we can see that this heat map in particular marries very well with the educational and the employment, the earnings heat map that David showed earlier. And then in the heart of the slide indicates where these individuals are working and in relation to the jobs that they have here in Kenner. So there are about 8,000 jobs in Kenner for people who are employed at the $40,000 or more level. And for the most part, those individuals are coming into the city of Kenner with 6,855 people who are living outside of the city and taking advantage of those jobs. Now there are 8,251 people who live in Kenner and then find employment elsewhere at that $40,000 per year level. And so it's very interesting to see where the educated and the higher income earning folks are working. For the most part, they're working outside of Kenner. And Kenner happens to capture a 1,128 people who can both live and work at Kenner, in Kenner, at that $40,000 per year rate. And so that number in particular is very telling, that there's only about 14% of people who can both live and work in the city of Kenner. And so that 14% is less than the 22.5% that Metairie hosts for that same mark. Jefferson Parish in general has 42% of its people who could both live and work in Kenner, and New Orleans has about 40% of that same population. So it's just very telling to see where people live, work, and how many people can do that at that $40,000 level within the city of Kenner. And so that's another indicator that we use to determine the quality of life in the city of Kenner. Next slide, please. And then we also are looking at the economic development opportunities that exist in the city. And so certainly at the international airport, with the growth of international trade and travel, we're hoping to be able to attract visitors and business, particularly to the Rivertown community, but then also to Esplanade Mall, excuse me. And then there's an emerging trend statewide as well as regionally. We see that there's partnership between higher education institutions as well as in private industry to include Amazon Web Services and Louisiana's technical colleges. And so these trends of partnership between higher ed and private industry is starting to spawn some ideas as to what could take place at the Esplanade Mall, as well as in Rivertown. We're taking a look at all of the trends in the area, as well as some of the historical industries, the industry strengths within the city and the region, but certainly these emerging trends have us excited. Next slide. Thank you. Those are my comments. And Sarah, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Randy. I'm going to go through a little bit of what we've heard and some of our preliminary ideas. So we've had some initial input. There's definitely more of that to come. We met with the Main Street Board, the Economic Development Advisory Board. We had stakeholder interviews and focus groups for both study areas over a 2-day period on January 5th and 6th. And we really learned a lot during that time, but we look forward to learning more. So at the board meetings, they were largely discussion driven, but we divided a lot of the comments into strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And a lot of what both the Economic Development Advisory Board and the Main Street Board were saying aligned with what we were hearing in the interviews. So some of those common themes are that the museums in Rivertown could be part of the attraction to bring visitors there. Same with the theaters. They continue to play a significant role in defining the character and bringing people to Rivertown. Walkable mixed-use development could be the easiest way to transform the Esplanade Mall and make it something more successful that better serves the residents of Kenner. Many people expressed the desire for more dining options, both fine dining and then, more casual dining to reflect some cultural diversity in the area. And then many people also mentioned that green spaces at the Esplanade Mall area could provide spaces for families and other kind of gatherings. We've definitely heard a lot more, but these were the top 5 things that came out of most of our interviews. I'm going to pop up a poll question. It'll show all of the questions, but please just answer the first one. I'm going to continue to pop them up for the other 4. And ideally it is showing up on your screen right now. We'll give about 30 seconds for people to answer. And the first question is, do you agree with what we've heard in the stakeholder interviews so far?
Sarah, I'm having difficulty. Where do I press the buttons?
I'm not sure what it looks like on your screen, but it should have like a list of questions, and ideally you answer the first one.
Sarah, it looks like the submit button is grayed out and you're not able to click on it.
Okay, you might have to answer all the, just if that's the point or problem, it might be that you have to answer all of them and then hit submit. So just kind of throw an answer in for the other three. I'll record the responses to the first one on paper, and then we'll relaunch it and it'll clear the answers.
That works, Sarah. Thank you.
No problem. All right, we'll give a few more seconds and I'll show the results here. All right. Looks like for the first question, we had 22 people say yes, 16 say no, mostly, and then 1 said no. So we're relatively on the right track, and I'm sure we'll continue hearing more of the same and different ideas. All right, so we take a lot of this feedback that we get and we kind of, put it through a funnel and a filter to start to see what the community values and establish the goals for what we need to do with our planning and design recommendations. So first off, we start kind of setting goals for the project, and this is our first pass at them. And then we'll expand on them and define them more through getting survey feedback and come back to you at the charrette to make sure that we're on the right track. But the first 5 that we have here are to catalyze investment to revitalize Kenner's Historic District, Rivertown, and the Esplanade Mall. The second one is to attract jobs. The third one is to improve connectivity and mobility in and around Rivertown, and particularly at the Esplanade Mall. The fourth one is to recommend infrastructure enhancements, and then finally encourage residential development. So I'm going to pop up this poll again, and we want you to answer the second question and just fill in any response for the other 3. But the second one is the one we want to focus on. And that question is, do these goals seem like a good starting point to direct ideas for these plans? All right, give a couple more seconds, but it looks like most of this same number of people have voted. And okay, and most people seem to think that we're on the right track there, so we'll continue refining and once we hear more feedback. And Tom, I'll pass it to you to go through these.
Yeah, so we had these preliminary ideas are basically all from the interviews. We haven't really dialed down that far into the project because, again, this is really a kickoff, but this is really what we heard from the community and stakeholders of this. The first thing is we do have, and we want to utilize the city-owned properties that are there as a catalyst project. We know that the theater does very, very well when COVID. I mean, all of these things rely on COVID going away. So if you haven't gotten your shot, go get your shot so we can all get back to normal. But so we do have these city properties, and it's a large portion of the historic district where the city owns that. So that can be where there are vacant lots that the city owns. Maybe that's more of a residential component or a mixed use component. Again, we talked to some private developers about integrating mixed use with commercial in there. It's just how we do it. But again, that's so important. Next one. And then number 2 is build on the levee path and the LaSalle landing for a trail and open space. And you already have the asset there. It's just what can we do to enhance that overall the quality of that. It looks like it's needs some loving care and some additional stuff. But again, if we had more residential units down in this area, that would certainly enliven that area. Next one. Add a mix of residential types to the underutilized parcels that transition into adjacent neighborhoods. This is, to me, one of the most important pieces of this whole puzzle is what kind of residential and how much can we get into the site, and what is your threshold of paying for density? I mean, it is so important to have people living down in this area, and also, having a balance of economic. We don't want, we want a cross section. The people that live there, we don't want them moving out. We want them staying, but we also want to add young professionals coming in. So we have a mix of community, which really, again, just adds to the vibrancy of any neighborhood. Next. Oh, what did I miss? I missed something. Yeah, I'm sorry, Sarah. Number 4 is to create streetscapes that are walkable. One of the things that again, when Linda took me down here, is if you look at William Street, it really, there's one side of the street, let's see, that's north, south, east, the west side of the street feels filled in. It has some restaurants, it has some shade. The other side is parking lots, and then there's an old strip center that has asphalt in the front, no shade whatsoever. So it just is not something that invites you in. Which you definitely want in New Orleans, in the New Orleans metro area. I went to LSU and Southeastern University. I know how hot it gets in the summertime. So we need to create that shade because that just adds an added value even in the spring. So next slide.
Okay. We're going to relaunch again. This is the one where we'll vote on number 3. And the question is, do you agree with the preliminary thoughts for Rivertown? And then just, again, provide a fake answer for the other 3 questions.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give about 10 more seconds. We're almost to the same participation rate as the other 2. All right. And here we can see that we have 1 person who says no, and then 20 that say yes, and 20 that say mostly. So we have some work to do here. Obviously, they're very preliminary thoughts, and we hope to keep hearing from you to make those better.
So the next one is Esplanade Mall. And the real challenge to this is, first of all, that we have a mall that's basically vacant. So we got to figure out how to use the structure itself in different ways, but then also the connectivity to this. And so you can see that it's in the heart of it. Really, if you looked at that overall map, it's in the heart of Kenner. And so it's really an important location geographically to Kenner, especially along Esplanade Mall and then 32nd Street and all those areas. And the other thing is it's close to the medical center, which is a real asset. So this has such great potential. Next slide. So consider phasing to retain. Well, Target's probably going to stay around in the area, and we don't know about Dillard's. We're trying to find that out. But we want to add connections to the neighborhoods, the canal streets, the pedestrian paths, and create an internal street grid system. It would be, just think about it. If you live on 50 or 33rd Street, you got to go up either north up to Esplanade Mall, or you got to go down to 32nd, then you come into the mall. If you could just cross over into it, it would be great. So if we can cross the canals, either with pedestrian or vehicular, or a combination of both, which would be really nice, it would really start to weave back into the fabric of the overall community and make it feel like it's part of it, especially if this became a much more mixed use type development versus just a big mall. This could be your town center. One of the big questions we asked during our interviews with all the people was, where is the there in Kenner? And really no one really had a response. And this is the there, it's just not there yet, right? I mean, this is a great geographic location. It just needs lots of love and stuff for it. Next one. So add mixed use development within a large residential component. Again, if we get the connectivity back into the neighborhoods, we add that residential component and a little town center that really has outdoor eating and patios. You could really do some really cool stuff with this. Next slide. And then the other part of it, which I love this idea, is we heard from y'all, is that you have the green lawn playground. Well, right across from the canal, if you had another green space, so you had a park within that whole development area that's for the community, and connected through either pedestrian or vehicle and pedestrian connections. Boy, this is a great area, and I think any developer coming in from around the country would be very excited about looking at this piece of property. Next slide. So we're up to a poll question.
Okay, this is the last one, and we will take your answer for number 4 and your fake answers for the first 3. And the question is very similar, but do you agree with the preliminary thoughts for the Esplanade Mall? Give it about 10 more seconds, and then I'll close it and show the results. Okay, scroll down here. Looks like we have 19 people that say yes, 4 that said no, and 18 that said mostly. So now I'm gonna go through the online engagement tutorial with you for a couple minutes, just so that it's not brand new when you get to it. So bear with me while I switch screens here. So this is the project website that I've mentioned. It has a series of engagement opportunities, and it'll have all of the information for the project. So I'll scroll down here on the home page. We have our project schedule. You can see all the phases here and what they are. We'll have our upcoming events here. You can see the virtual kickoff meeting. We'll always have our Zoom link available on this. And then we'll also have our dates for any of the activities that we open up. And then scrolling down further, this is where the activities are, the interactive map, taking the surveys, and then we have frequently asked questions and a contact page. But we really want you to participate. So we have about 4 different ways you can access any of these activities. So then if you click here at the top, it'll take you to the survey. We have one for each site. Please take both if you're able, but just take whichever one you're able to do. And then if you prefer not to do them online, you can download them. We have buttons here where you can download the PDF and you can fill it out by hand, scan it and email it to me. My email address is there right above it. Or you can drop them off at City Hall at the business license window. We'll also have them available at City Hall for pickup if you prefer to go there rather than online. And then finally, we have the interactive map, which might take a second to load since I have multiple programs going right now. So we'll see if it. Okay, there we go. So over here, the first thing that pops up is how to participate, which describes how to navigate through the map, which largely depends on these sidebar tabs. And then when you click on, there's also a link here to get back to the survey, just in case you want to go back there. And then when you click on Citywide, the map stays here at Citywide, provides some background on the project. And then when you click to Rivertown here on the sidebar, it'll zoom into Rivertown. We have some information on Rivertown. And then again, you can also take the survey here. So if you want to do it all in one place, you can do it here by the map. And then again, with Esplanade Mall, information here about the mall, the survey over on the side. You can close out of this sidebar to get more of the mall in the site. And then you can zoom in and out here on the map and navigate around just like you would on Google Maps. But if you want to provide comments on specific places, you can drag from the top here and it'll pop up a window. You can leave a comment, you can upload a photo. You will need to submit your email address to submit your comments, and your name and all of that stuff are optional. And then you just click add comments, and then people are able to comment on yours and you can comment on theirs and like or dislike them and start community conversations that way. So now if I can close out of this, we can go to the Q&A portion of the meeting. So. There we go. Okay, Heidi, have we had questions rolling in through the chat?
No, no questions were submitted via chat.
Here, if you have not sent any through the chat and you want to ask a question, you can either you can turn on your video and raise your hand, or you can go into your participants menu, which will be at the bottom, I believe. And then at the bottom, there will say raise hand and we can call on you. Okay.
Adam, are you seeing any hands?
Not currently, no.
Okay.
Well, this is Tom Walsh. While we're waiting for somebody to raise their hand or ask a comment, I would ask you, the people that did say no, I hope you take the surveys and let us know, since you did not agree with some of the questions. Give us some feedback on what you think should happen on Esplanade Mall. I mean, I think there are more no's there. than the other one. So we'd love to hear your ideas of what you think should happen to the mall site if it's not some of the stuff that we've already heard from your other neighbors and stakeholders.
All right. George has his hand raised. George, go ahead. But you might be on mute.
Yes, this is, can you all hear me?
Now we can.
Yeah, I'm on an iPad that I'm not used to, obviously. I just want to thank you guys for putting this presentation together and the work that you have done so far. It is really, really important that these two areas are developed to the full extent for the success of our city. And I think that you guys are on the right track. And I love the way we are including the public to make sure we hear everybody and what they want developed at these sites. We know we're not going to get everything that we want, but the Esplanade Mall is definitely a place that could turn into the rock in the center of Kenner. So it's in my district, so I'm partial to that, obviously. And I appreciate what you guys are doing. If you need me in any way, please reach out to me.
Thank you.
Candace, I believe Mr. Bob Bales has his hand raised.
Candace, you're on mute.
Thank you, Adam. Go ahead, Bob. And check your mute button.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I think I'm very impressed with what you all have done. You've got a lot of people on staff on this company with this consulting company that know their business, and it's good to hear a good, thorough look at Kenner and the identification of where we are and where we might go. And I just wanted to ask a couple questions. One is the PowerPoint the presentation you went through today. Is that I think you've got about 37 people logged in. If I'm understanding correctly, 35 or 40 people logged in. Is that correct?
We had as many as 66 at one point.
66. Okay. The presentation that you went through here, is that going to be available? There's a lot of information there that shows the diligence that you all are going through. Is that going to be available somewhere for other people to look at if they're not participating in this meeting?
Bob, we've had the question come from the mayor. Would like to put it on the city's website and have it available for people to see. Tonight's meeting will also be on YouTube, so people will be able to go back and watch the entire thing if they'd like to. So yes, we are trying to make the PowerPoint available.
Okay. And your survey, the survey period is now through about the end of March. Is that correct?
Early March.
Early March.
It'll be through March 8th.
Only through March 8th. Okay. Now I wanted to ask one question. The gentleman, I'm sorry, I don't recall his name, was talking about the number of people in Kenner that, that are income levels 40,000 and greater, and how many come into the city and how many leave the city and how many live and work in the city. And I was curious, it sounded like the numbers that we have, I was curious about the interpretation of the numbers of where we are with that. You all do this, you see a lot of things like this nationally, and I was curious about where you see us compared to other cities in that respect.
Randy, you want to go ahead and answer that?
I'll take a stab at it. Thank you, Candace. Bob, I appreciate your question. Essentially, as I referenced, I was looking primarily at the relationship between Kenner's commuter flow versus Metairie, Jefferson Parish, and New Orleans. And I wanted to make sure that Kenner was at least on par at level within the region. I don't necessarily see a standard. I know my colleague David, he might have a different opinion. I don't necessarily see a standard as in terms of consistency, but I definitely like to see consistency throughout a region. And because Kenner has, in this case, employed in the area 14% of its individuals making $40,000 or more versus the 22, 42, and 40% of Metairie, Jefferson Parish, and New Orleans, respectively, it leads me to believe that there is an opportunity to gain more employers within the city of Kenner at that $40,000 or more level. And so it leads me to ask more questions as to how to employ more people at that level and how Kenner can retain that population, that employee base. And so we look at the types of jobs, the types of employers, as well as, to David's point, the type of accommodations and amenities that would have someone live within the city of Kenner. And so from a percentage perspective, I don't necessarily see a consistency. There's not a consistency that I want to see, but I do want to see something of a consistency region-wide. And if I don't see that consistency, then what I'll do is start asking questions as to how we can ensure that, in this case, the city of Kenner is fair share. David, do you have any questions or comments to the same?
Yeah, I think that was a great answer, Randy. Let me add just a couple points to that. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, great. Again, we work nationwide, so I see a lot more of these numbers. I think it's pretty consistent with what I would call a suburban bedroom community. That's what Kenner was sort of like originally kind of developed as, where you saw most of your growth as a suburban bedroom community and you commuted into job corps elsewhere. I think that continues to be what we see in the data. I think that in the New Orleans metro, you've essentially become kind of what we refer to as almost like an inner ring suburb, in that some of the newer growth has kind of gone beyond you, further to the north, out to St. Tammany and other parishes beyond. And so I think it's really important, in order to start seeing significant change in those numbers, we have to think about reinventing ourselves. So it's completely natural kind of where you guys are in the sort of evolution of your community. And it's a great opportunity that we have with these great sites, particularly with the mall having such a large land area, that we have that ability to kind of use this as a nucleus to reinvent some of the community and help start to change that. One of the challenges is if we remain a bedroom community, that's great, but it creates economic development challenges. As I mentioned, it's harder to get employers to come in. It's harder to increase our commercial tax revenue and base. It's harder to create workforce, job opportunities for the community within the community. And if we maintain that kind of bedroom community status, as you saw in the numbers, so many folks not only are commuting out to go to jobs, but even some of the jobs you have, people are having to commute in, possibly because you don't have the right housing product, and it's actually making the traffic story worse. So like fixing that can actually help over time even decrease traffic, which of course is something everyone's interested in. But great question, thank you.
I have two other questions, if I might. Well, I guess just a comment mainly. Somewhere in the presentation, you were discussing public-private partnerships for education as a trend in, I guess, the region and in the state. And I agree, and I think that's a good observation and a valuable point. And I hope that surfaces in your process and I'm sure that it will, because you're talking about reinvesting. Well, education is reinvesting in people or investing in people. So I think that's a really good point. I wanted to ask one other question in terms of the business partners. or I should say the stakeholders that you're engaging in the process. I assume that also includes JEDCO. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Adam, who else is who has their hand raised?
There are no other hands raised, but there are some questions and comments appearing in the chat.
There's
Hi.
one question to go over the preliminary ideas for the Esplanade Mall again.
Okay, we're not going to go back and redo a whole lot of stuff tonight. With the presentation is all going to be available on YouTube. To rehash everything tonight would have us here till midnight. So I appreciate that question. What else do you have, Heidi?
The only other comment was a recommendation to please keep Heritage Park open as an opportunity for family and community activities.
Okay, great.
And
And
that was
Evelyn, I am happy to talk to you about that tomorrow. If you'd like to give me a call, and I can go back through it with you. I don't want to cut anyone off. We can't redo the whole presentation tonight.
Candace, we do have another hand raised too.
Okay, who's that?
John Martinez.
John, go ahead.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now. Just a few comments and then a question. I really like the idea of making both areas more inviting by making the streets more tree-lined, shady, more walkable. I think those are really good ideas for making it more attractive for people to just spend the day. Also, I like the idea of the levee and riverfront development idea. That's a really underutilized space from what I can tell, and having some activities out there, maybe a few exhibits of some type or of that nature might be really good. I liked more parks. That was a great idea. Those are always a good asset for any area, and there probably aren't enough of them in the Kenner area. As far as adding more street bridges over the canals by the mall, you might get some pushback from neighborhoods on that as far as creating more traffic for them. I'm not sure how that might play out, but that's just sort of a off the cuff comment for me. And then my question is, which is probably not going to surprise Candace, is do you guys have any comments about the currently defunct observatory, astronomical observatory that's in the Rivertown area right now?
Tom, you want to speak to the overall approach to the museums.
I'm sorry, repeat that again, Candace.
We didn't look at it specifically as a standalone, John, but they are focusing on the museums and what we can do to enhance the museums, and certainly the observatory is a part of that.
Okay. I think my ideas for the observatory that I've previously discussed with Kenner could actually address several of the things that were brought up in the presentation because of its educational nature and ability to attract people to Rivertown. I'll probably go ahead and submit something online. Candace, if you think that's a good idea to the website.
That would be great, John. And we would love for you to join us in March.
Yeah, be sure and come. If you have ideas like that, please. This is Tom Walsh. Please come.
Okay. That would be great. I'll be happy to participate.
All right, Adam, how do we look? And
We have another hand up, Miss Demetria Bridges.
Okay.
Yes, that's me, and great presentation tonight. I really appreciate it. I am going to make a case for the arts As far as Rivertown is concerned, I am a board member of the Rivertown Arts Council. And I just want that to be on your minds as you're considering what to do in Rivertown. We currently have a courtyard there on Williams Boulevard. Just again, as you are brainstorming and thinking things out, just keep that in mind, that area, that we also use it for the arts.
Well, rest assured that I was raised by my grandparents. My grandmother wrote a book on the Baltimore theater, and she made me go to the theater, which I love. Theater, and she also made me go to opera, which I didn't like. But the fact is, I love the art. So don't worry. I could give you a grand tour of the National Art Gallery in Washington, D.C. So this is very close to my heart. And I think it's a very important asset for Kenner, and we've got to take advantage of it and use it to its fullest extent.
Yes, thanks. It's already on your mind. Thanks a lot.
Okay, Adam? We're coming up on an hour and a half, which was what we were hoping to keep tonight too, because we don't want to lose anyone. We have lost a few people throughout the course of the evening, but I'm really, really happy with attendance, and this has just been great. I think if tonight is an indication of how the project will go, we're going to come out with some really good stuff to work with. So I just want to thank everyone again, remind you to please take the surveys online. We're going to be putting the link to the surveys on the city's website, and we'll be sending that out in various other methods as well. So just continue to stay in touch, watch, listen, and chart our progress as we go. And hopefully I'll see you all again in March. And be great if we can be doing that in person. We're going to do our best. Depends on the COVID situation. We certainly don't want to risk anyone's health. So I'm really happy with the way all of this went tonight as well, since we had to do it remotely, virtually. So anything else, Sarah? You want to close us out?
Thank you for all of your time tonight. We really appreciate you sitting through this presentation with us and giving us some ideas. Please make sure you fill out the surveys online, go to the maps, and just stay tuned to when we have our March meetings scheduled. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Nice tire, Randy.